Hello, computer animation students. This is the first video that you'll be seeing for your computer animation course. In it, I'm going to be explaining how to do the 5-mesh object, as well as explaining some of the basic concepts you'll need for just understanding how to work with the program Blender. So first off, what I'm going to do is just share my screen. So you should here in a moment be able to see the same Blender screen that you're going to be working with. So in here, what you're going to see when you first come into this program is you're going to see this dialog box that appears. You'll likely see Blender 2.79 because that's what we're using now. But this dialog box is usually not necessary for you to work with. So you can just simply click over to the side to get rid of it. Now, the first thing I wanted to point out to you is that by default, you're going to come into a screen that looks just like this with a cube in the middle. And you're in perspective view, as you can see. And what we're going to do is we're going to just make sure that we have this cube selected. Now, you can see it's selected because it's highlighted in yellow. But if I were to right click, let's say on the camera over here, and then right click again on the cube, the way we select an object is by right clicking on it. We're going to then press the delete key on the keyboard, and I'm just going to click delete to get rid of this. Now, instead, I'm going to replace that cube with a monkey face. So I'm going to click on the add option. Your add option might be at the bottom of your screen instead of the top like mine. But I'm going to click on add mesh, and I'm going to choose the monkey option. So when I get the monkey in here, there's a couple things I can do to see this better. So first off, I can zoom in a little bit so I can see it a little better, but you can see that we're not seeing the monkey straight on. So there's a couple things we can do. So if you look on the far right of your keyboard, you're going to see that there is a group of numbers, what we call the numpad on your keyboard, and you're going to want to use that exclusively to basically adjust your views. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to press the number 5 on the numpad, and notice what it's done. It's changed this to ortho view. So by default, we're in perspective view, and that's not the view we want to be in when we're modeling. We want to be in orthographic view. So we're going to press 5 to make sure we're in orthographic view. Now, if I want to see this as a front view of this monkey face, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press number 1 on the numpad, and notice now it says we're in front ortho. So I can zoom in or out by using the scroll wheel on my mouse. So that's my mouse little wheel that we have in the middle there. We can zoom in or out by moving it like this. We can also then go to top view by pressing number 7. What we'll see is the top of the monkey's head. Or we can press number 3 on the numpad, which will give us a right view of the monkey. But I'm going to switch back now to the front view so I can sort of see my monkey. Now let's look at a couple other things we can do to manipulate any object in what we call object mode. So while we're in object mode, if I want to make my object larger, what I can do is I can use a shortcut called S. So S stands for scale, and if I were to mouse in or out after I press letter S, it allows me to scale in or out. So I could actually set this as the size I want by clicking with the left button of my mouse. And then if I didn't want to have that happen, I could press Control Z, which is a way of undoing what I just did. So S obviously controls my size of my object. But what I can also do is I can press S, and then in conjunction with that, a number. So let's say if I want to make it 3 times bigger, I press S3, and now it makes it 3 times bigger. I'm just going to press escape to that. Or I could press S and minus, or sorry, not minus, but S.3 and make it about 1/3 of what it was. I'm just going to press escape to that as well. But you can see the numbers can help us manipulate the size of our object as well. Now we can also make an object bigger in just one of the 3 axes. And when I refer to axes, what you can see down here on the left is it shows the Z, the X, and if I go to the side view, also the Y. The Y is green, the Z is blue, and the X is red. Now, if I want to, let's say, make the X axis just bigger, what I could do is I could go S and then press the letter X and then press 2. And what it's going to do is it's just going to make the X axis part of my monkey bigger. So it's stretched it out this way. Now, once again, I could Control Z to undo that. Now, another method of doing this is if we look down on the toolbar here at the bottom, you'll see a little colored trident. And if I click on this or click on it again, I get 3 more tools that are available. And the one that looks kind of like a cube on top of a stick is the scale option. And if I click on this, notice I have my 3 different axes shown here, the red one being the X axis. And if I drag by the red axis, I can scale it kind of like I just did with the SX2. And I'm just going to Control Z to undo that. But you can see how this would manipulate using any of these different axes the way we would like. So that is scale using the letter S as a shortcut. Now, if I wanted to move my object, what I can do is I can press the letter G. The letter G enables me to move my object around. So I could move it around. If I click, it would stay where I want, but I could always Control Z to undo. Now I can also move my object by using letter G and then adding a number. So if I press like G2, it'll move over to grid lines basically. Now, if I wanted to, I could basically as well, I could G, and then I could press, let's say, the letter Z if I wanted to move up instead, and I could press like 3 to move up, and notice it moves up, and if I scroll the screen, you can just see that it's kind of moved up in there. So once again, I can Control Z to undo that, and then zoom in again, but I can also control my positioning by using this arrow key here, the translate manipulator, and I could move my object up or down, or even across if I go into side view in the y-axis by using those arrows. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So the last thing we can do as well is we can rotate. So you can see that we have a tool that kind of looks like an arc, and that would enable me to rotate. So I could try and rotate my shape using this method here. So if I have my object here, I can try and spin it around. I'm just going to escape or Control Z out of that. But another method, which is probably easier than using this actually, is just using the letter R, which is a shortcut, and then we can put in the degrees that we want to move it by. So let's say I say R45, that's going to rotate 45 degrees. Now remember, degrees is 360 for a full circle. So if I pressed escape here and went R, let's say 180, what we're going to do is we're going to turn it right upside down. And once again, we can do this by any axis. So right now, by default, I'm doing it on the Z, but I could go RY and I could go 90, and it will determine which one. So I could go RX 90, and you can see how they rotate differently, in RZ 90. So you can play with that a little bit, but you can definitely rotate your objects using this tool here or the letter R. So hopefully that all makes sense to you. Now let's take a look at how we do the actual project itself. So let's say that we wanted to take this monkey and we want to make it into sort of give it a body, I guess you would say. So one of the things we can do is I'm just going to turn this tool off right now. I'm just going to click on that trident, and I'm going to shift and then hold down the scroll wheel so I can scroll my screen up, so I can just sort of bring this up a little bit. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to add a bit of a body to my monkey. So I'm going to click down here. So this is what we call our 3D cursor. And this is where it's going to indicate to us where the object is going to go. So if I add another object in object mode, and I always want to be in object mode when I'm adding objects, I can click on add mesh, and then I could add a cone. And now I can have essentially what would be kind of like a neck for this monkey. Now I'm going to scale this to about S.5 to make it a little bit smaller because it's a little bit big. And I'm going to use my translate manipulator to move this up a little bit. Now it looks pretty good right now, but let's go in side view and see if it still looks good. So probably I need to move this over a little bit more and pull up a little bit so it kind of blends in with the head of this monkey. And I could even potentially scale this a little bit so I make it a little bit thicker this way. So it sort of blends like this. And then if I look sideways, that's what I have. Okay, so I've got a bit of a neck for my monkey. So I'm going to click down around here with my 3D cursor, click on add mesh, and now I'm going to add a UV sphere. So you can see what the sphere looks like, and this is going to be kind of like our body. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and scale this so it's a little bit longer, and I'm going to possibly scale the whole thing so it's maybe about 0.7 of its size, and I'm going to position it using my translate manipulator right about here, and so it sort of joins in with my neck. So that will be my body, and I actually want to probably scale it a little bit this way and connect it so it sort of sits nicely in relation to my neck. So I have this here, and I could possibly even widen it a bit so it's a little bit thicker as well. And there's sort of my body of my monkey. And I'm going to just stretch it out a little bit as well and bring it down so that I've got it sort of like this. Now, that looks pretty good. Now, so what I could do now is I could try and make some legs for this. So to make legs, what I'm going to use is I'm going to use a different mesh object. So add mesh, and I'm going to use a cylinder. So notice I've used a monkey face, a cone, a UV sphere, and now a cylinder. So I've already used 4 different types of meshes. We're going to need to use 5 different meshes in the assignment that you have. Now, obviously, my cylinder, this is going to be a leg, is going to be way too large. So I'm going to scale it. So S 0.2, I'm going to make it quite a bit thinner, and I'm going to rotate it a little bit. And I'm going to now scale this using my scale manipulator to make this a bit longer. Oops, let me just undo that. Didn't actually want to do that. I just want to scale the whole thing about, let's say about 6 times longer. No, don't want to actually do that. I'm just going to Control Z and bring it back here. I'm just going to lengthen it out a little bit. So I'm going to lengthen it out a bit, and then I'm going to rotate it now and sort of have it sticking out of my body. Now, if you look here, and we can pan around in a sort of a 3D view by just simply holding down the scroll wheel and then just rocking my mouse around. And I can sort of 3D pan around to see sort of what this is looking like. So it's looking not too bad right now. It's going to go into front view again by pressing 1 on the numpad. Now, if I have my leg here, what I could do is I could make an additional leg, an additional part, so sort of like the second part to this, by holding down, by making sure that this cylinder is selected, so it's selected here, and then holding down the Shift key and pressing D to duplicate. What this does, it creates an exact copy of what I have here. Now, instead of keeping this the same size, so I'm going to now S and then make this about 0.7 of its size, and using the translate manipulator or just even G to grab, I'm going to just bring this up and make this the other part of his leg. Now that looks a little bit long, so I'm just going to actually possibly bring this up a little bit more into his body, bring this up a little bit more in, and that's going to look pretty good. And now what I can do is I can in fact join these 2 objects. So this object here, if I want to select an additional object, I hold down the Shift key and I right click on the 2 objects. So they're both selected now. And if I then hold down the Control key and press letter J, I can join these 2 together. So now if I click away from this and then click on this, this is just one object. So then I can Shift D and I can make a duplicate of this, and then I could rotate this so that it sits basically on the other opposite side of the object I have. So basically then I have now a duplicate of this. So I've got 2 legs here. Now the last thing I can do, and I know this probably won't be the most sensible, just going to adjust this a little bit more, but this probably might not be the most sensible use of shapes, but I'm going to, just so we can see what other shapes we can use, I'm going to use an icosphere, and I'm going to scale this to about 0.3, and I'm going to I'm going to scale it to 0.3, and I'm going to move this over a little bit, and I'm just going to then duplicate this, so Shift D, and I'm just going to make a couple of arms out of this. So I could use this as sort of a kind of an arm sort of way of making something. So I can then Shift right click on all 3 of these, Control J to join them, and then I could Shift D to duplicate those 3 and then bring them over here, and I could rotate these around and position them over here as my other arms. So what we've done here is I've done a very quick use of a number of different mesh objects. And once again, what I mean by mesh objects is when we go to add mesh, we have basically your icosphere, your cylinder, your cube, your monkey face, your torus, even your cube. The only 2 you probably don't want to use right now is a plane and a circle, because those are 2-dimensional objects. But you're going to use a combination of 5 different types of meshes in various ways to make something that other than what I've just shown you here. So you wouldn't be making a monkey face, you would be making something of your own creation. So in the past, students have used this to maybe make a house or a bike or even like a sword, whatever your creative mind comes up with. But what I want you to do, and remember, you always need to do whenever you start any assignment, is you want to go to File on the menu bar, click on Save As, And in your case, you're going to save to the H drive. But for me, I'm going to save to my hard drive, which is a C drive. But you would save to your H drive into your computer animation folder that we've made. But you're going to give it a name, and I would give it the name 5Mesh Object. And when I have finished saving this and click on Save as Blender File, what I'll see is that I know that I've saved this because it will have that name up for me on the screen. So I will see the name 5Mesh Object in there, and then I will know that I've saved. So hopefully that makes sense to you. That's the first assignment. So you can work on that independently and make sure that you show it to me for 10 marks. Thanks for watching.